I get approached so often where people are asking me, how the heck I have energy on a regular basis, right? Now it's dinner time right now, and I'm still going. I've been going since like 5 o'clock this morning.
Right.
Over this past month, I have been on stage twice. I've been in board meetings. I took some notes before we started recording just so I wouldn't miss anything. I opened up my calendar in order to, because I forget half the shit. We're in the middle of negotiating an acquisition for a company, and I've been in 5 freaking meetings with a board of attorneys for that. I run 4 companies every single week. And then I'm done with all this stuff by 3 o'clock, and I'm hanging with my kids, right? So how do you get all this stuff done? How do you stay focused? How do you make these split-second decisions and be able to do this when most people are having difficulty staying focused on 1 or 2 things throughout the day? And I consistently bring your name up, so I'm super psyched about hanging out and talking tonight. I mean, you and I we're fortunate because we're friends, as well as you being in Club 28, where we get a chance to talk every single week. But then we all, you came down here not long ago and we spent some time together. I've been out to Florida and we've done some great stuff at your place. It's great. However, when that subject comes up consistently, I'm telling people, well, here's a list of the things that I like to do, but really, I've got an executive health doc. This guy is the smartest person that I know when it comes to mitochondrial health, when it comes to gut health, when it comes to keeping yourself in shape, not just physically, but mentally and on a cellular level. Because when you're not clogged up with all the crap, your brain works so much better. So I'm hoping that I want to pick your brain a little bit, and I want to give as much content as we can about keeping ourselves, our cognitive focus really fast, our body healthy, our physical energy high. And so I'll give you a quick introduction. Dr. Anthony Capasso, board certified internal medicine MD. You graduated top of your class. You work with sports teams, keeping them on par, but more specifically for our group, you work with top executives who fly in to see you on a regular basis so that they can stay focused. So how do you do it? Like, how do we stay focused?
How do you stay focused? I wish there was just like one simple answer.
Is there a pill? Can we just take one pill and that's it? One time?
Yeah, no, I wish it was that easy. One of the most important things, and this is kind of what I look at, is kind of what's your overall balance. And I look at sleep. Sleep's probably one of the most important things. If you're fatigued or tired, you've got to get that right first. Because if you don't start there, you're never going to feel good. When you get a good night rest, you feel energized. So sleep is part of that number one question I'm going to ask is, well, number one, how well are you sleeping? Do you feel rested when you wake up? And if you're not, then we have to figure out why that's the case and try to improve that. And that can be challenging for sure. So sleep's part of it. The other is really how you're fueling yourself. What are you eating? Are you loading yourself up with a bunch of caffeine and simple sugars? And so your blood sugars are spiking and you're crashing really, really hard. And then you keep drinking the caffeine. And lo and behold, you're just kind of zapped out because all that energy that's stored up in those cells has been pushed out by the caffeine, drinking throughout the day. So, so fueling really, really important, for sure. Sleep, really, really important. And then how are you managing your stress? And we've talked about this on multiple occasions, making sure that we have a way of relaxing sometime during the day. I love exercising. And that's one of the ways that I relax on a regular basis. And I think exercise is also a great tool for helping you manage the stress and improving your cognitive function. So we know clinically that that patients that exercise more, the blood's pumping to the brain, the blood flows there, it's bringing on all those good nutrients, brain much, much better, especially when it comes to aging. And then I look at, you mentioned gut health, and there's a term called inflammation, which is like when your immune system gets turned on, swelling is a sign of like inflammation. So are you inflamed, right? So if the brain is inflamed, it's not going to focus right. If your cells are inflamed in your body, you're going to feel tired, you're going to feel fatigued, your joints are going to hurt. And a lot of that comes with what we eat. And what happens is as an executive, when you have a lot on your plate, like you mentioned, your stress levels are really, really high. Cortisol, which is this hormone that gets released when your body's stressed, goes really, really high, and it starts affecting all of your systems in a bad way, especially if it's chronically elevated. So your hormones like testosterone or estrogen will dump. Your thyroid will start to look like it's not working. It affects your immune system. It affects your weight. You start getting, belly weight. And then when you start looking at the intestinal function, it starts to affect the ability, and you start to get food sensitivity, you start to get bloating, you start to get gas, you start to get irritable bowel type symptoms. And all of that, drains that kind of energy out of your system. So your focus goes down. So making sure that we're addressing the gut in addition to the other things that I mentioned are, kind of core, but the ultimate thing is to make sure that your cells are working and functioning good. Because when they're not functioning good and they're not producing the energy, the brain's not going to be able to function. So when we look at, and you mentioned mitochondrial disease, which is, one of my favorite things. And
well, favorite things to talk about, not favorite things that's for sure.
Yeah, no, right. You're right. Definitely favorite things to talk about. And it's because, how I kind of transitioned my care and how I practice medicine today was based on a lot of the things that you were saying. I was working in an ICU in a hospital, and 12-hour shifts, 7P to 7A, in addition to my residency, which was full-time. So I basically was constantly in a high cortisol stress state. We were doing, resuscitating patients every night. So after 3 years, I was super tired, super fatigued. Started having problems eating foods, bowel issues. And I'm like, and I remember this distinctly. I was playing tennis with one of my friends. He's one of the local teaching pros, and I grew up playing tennis. And I'm out there hitting, and within like 10 minutes, I was exhausted. And for me, as competitive as I am, that was like the knife in my heart, because I never thought that I would get to the place where I just, I felt like I was so out of shape. But, so stress causes, weight gain. It affects your energy, and it affects your energy by killing these cells, these parts of our cells that produce energy, the mitochondria. So I started focusing myself on, well, how can I improve my mitochondria? And so what are the best ways of improving mitochondria? So I looked at my diet. I made sure that my calories were a little bit reduced because that improves mitochondrial function. I decreased sugars in my diet because we know sugars really clog up the cells much more. So when your body takes carbohydrates or sugars and it burns them in the mitochondria, it produces byproducts, and those byproducts can actually damage your mitochondria over time. And then I started, making sure that my sleep was back because I knew that was part of my triggers. I worked on my gut, stayed on a very low inflammatory diet, and then I started taking nutrients to help naturally boost my mitochondrial function. And it was crazy. So what I did was I went to PubMed, started, researching, natural nutrients that improve mitochondrial function. And I read something on a nutrient called carnitine. So I started taking carnitine. And then I saw something on resveratrol, which comes from blueberries and grapes. Started taking that. And I looked at the clinical studies, looked at the dosing that were in these clinical studies that had like positives, and started taking that particular, I started blending them. And it was amazing how my body changed. And it was like, I was in my mid-30s at the time. I wasn't even trying to lose weight. I dropped about probably 12 to 15 pounds. But my energy was unbelievable. And what was crazy is I didn't tell any of my friends for 2 years. So when I was playing sports and I played flag football and softball and tennis, I wasn't getting tired. And, I remember hitting again with my friend and I, only, unfortunately, I wish I was playing more at the time, but I wasn't playing that much. But my endurance was better than his, and he was playing every day. So it was pretty cool to be able to kind of change my body chemistry. And at that time, I realized, wow, I kind of found the fountain of youth, and I really realized, what medicine is really about how to improve your body's function naturally to prevent illnesses. And as I started learning and reading more about mitochondrial function, when you look at brain diseases, whether it's focus issues like ADD or dementia, it's all mitochondrial dysfunction. So, naturally everything starts to improve. My immune system improved, my focus improved, my endurance improved. And to me, that's kind of like, if you're taking care of your cells, it's an incredible thing. One of the things which is really neat that is kind of in vogue these days is intermittent fasting, right? And so what intermittent fasting does is it helps to kind of get rid of the waste in the cells. Like when you don't eat a certain time, your cells need time to push out that. But what we're doing is we're improving mitochondrial function with it. So intermittent fasting mimicking diets, anything that caloric restricts and gives your body a little bit of stress, your body reacts by, trying to heal itself and make things better.
Yeah. So if I'm going to stop you so that we could dig into some of the things that you're saying, please, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So you're talking a lot about mitochondrial dysfunction, right? Which is caused by a lot of the shit that we do during the day, a lot of the stress, a lot of the things that when we're in meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting, or we're in the middle of a product launch, or maybe there's a company that's having problems and that's causing even more stress, or whatever happens. That's like a cascade effect that then causes more things in our life that hurts our mitochondria even more. It's not just the stress, it's the lack of sleep, because we wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and can't get back to sleep because we got our brain going. But let's talk about the opposite, right? Mitochondrial biogenesis, which you've explained to me in the past. We've had deep conversations about this. Mitochondrial biogenesis being the your cells have a certain number of mitochondria in them, anywhere from 2 to hundreds, I think, depending on the cell.
Yeah, the heart is probably the most dense. There's
right.
thousands. There's thousands of mitochondria.
Thousands, that's what it was. So, so as stress causes problems to some of these mitochondria, right, they become deformed and toxic. And if somebody doesn't understand how to then get that out and replace them with healthy new mitochondria, which is mitochondrial biogenesis, when a healthy mitochondria splits and then now we have healthy mitochondria in there. If somebody doesn't understand how to do that on a regular basis, then they age much faster. Their cognitive ability goes down, right? I know I'm getting this right because I've heard you say it so many times.
Right. You're on it.
I'm like, let me just put my Dr. Capasso hat on and make believe I'm him. But that's, so that's it. But there's a lot of things that trigger mitochondrial biogenesis, help us to create healthy mitochondria, because that cell, the reason why I was saying there's only a certain amount in there, there's only a certain amount that could fit in certain cells. Yes, there may be thousands in the heart cells, but once you got whatever the capacity is, that cell doesn't accept anymore because it's not programmed to. So if there's one that's deformed, the only way to get it out is to increase the healthy ones, and then they push the dead ones out. It's freaking amazing when you explain this shit to me. So you're talking about potentially fasting and diet things and some nutrients. Some of the things that I've done is on a regular basis, I do cold therapy on a regular basis, which also increases that. But there's a lot of things. So let's talk more about the good parts.
Yeah, there's a lot. So you hit on a couple of key things. Number one is mitochondria get injured by a lot of things. So mitochondria don't have a good shield around them in the cells. So a lot of things affect them. high carbohydrate diets that, I mentioned that earlier. The amount of environmental toxicities that we see in our systems. I mean, most of us are really good. We detox very, very well, and we get rid of these things. But that's another huge. Plastics in our diets, the gasoline, the fumes, the additives. I mean, all that stuff affects mitochondrial function. So understand that everyone has injury to their mitochondria. Okay. As we age, we lose mitochondria normally. So I think it's about 5 to 8% drop after the age of 30 per year.
Wow.
Okay, or I'm sorry, per decade. So 5 to 8% mitochondria drop per decade. Now, the good news is that you can improve that. You can improve it through regular exercise. Probably the best stimulus is regular exercise. But there's also, I talked a little about some of the nutrients. There's something called nutrigenomics. It's how nutrients affect your genes. So we know things can affect genes in a bad way, like if you smoke, you can turn on cancer genes. Certain nutrients can turn on the genes that make more mitochondria. So that's that mitochondrial biogenesis. Green tea, carnitine, the resveratrol that I was talking about. So those are some, rutin. So there's a whole slew of really cool antioxidants, and that's why they're antioxidants, because they're acting in a way to improve how your body functions and how it handles and manages stress. But the mitochondria are used for a whole slew of things. So they're used for hormone regulation like estrogen, testosterone, calcium regulation. They're involved with how we metabolize our foods.
Hey, so hang on for 1 second. What a cool correlation. What a cool correlation. Because so many people, I'm sure, come to you, guys, executives, come to you and say, you know what, I'm getting tired in the middle of the day, or I can't, I'm putting on fat like I had, like I've never done before. I'm not good in bed as much anymore. I'm sure that they come to you for this, because I know that this is some of the stuff that you treat from knowing you for so many years. However, keeping yourself healthy, focusing on the mitochondria is not just helping our brain to function like it should function in business, but it's also helping our hormones to function at whatever the optimal level it is that we need at our age, right?
Absolutely.
But lack
of
that could literally cause low T in guys.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so, I mean, when you start looking at thyroid disease, you start looking at hypogonadism, low testosterone. I mean, this is the cell's production, right? So if the cell isn't working right, doesn't have enough energy, we're going to see these types of things. One other clarification, you were talking about the number of mitochondria. The other important thing is the function of the mitochondria that you have. So it's not just the number, but it's the function. So if you've got mitochondria that are kicking out at a high level, 24 volts, for instance, versus 8 volts, the cells are working. So you want healthy, functioning mitochondria. The other main thing that mitochondria do is they're involved with the natural cell death. So if mitochondria get messed up, the cells don't die, and what we see is one of the basis for cancers is mitochondrial dysfunction.
So if they're not functioning properly, the cell doesn't die, and what is it?
So there's a term called autophagy that's involved in clearing. Is
it autophagy or is it atophagy?
Yeah. So there's apoptosis, which
that's what I'm thinking of. Yeah.
So apoptosis is cell death, and that's what the mitochondria are involved with, is cell death. The autophagy has to do with how you're cleaning the cells out. So like when you're doing intermittent fasting, that helps promote. What you're doing is you're loading the mitochondria with not a lot of food, so the system's able to clean itself out, so it runs better. The analogy that I'll use with my patients is, if you've got a bunch of systems on your computer and your computer's running slow, but you got to shut the whole system down and reboot it. That's kind of what our bodies need at night. We need that sleep. Without the sleep, you're not able to regenerate those neurons in your brain. And mitochondrial function, I mean, in brain is huge. So sleep is one of the main reasons why you may have, dysfunctional mitochondria and not be able to focus during the day.
Hey, would you then introduce a specific nutrient or something prior to sleep in order to facilitate that, or is that not helpful?
Well, I think there's a lot of nutrients that can help. Like if you're someone that wakes up early in the morning, that could be a cortisol, raise that kind of comes up.
Yeah, you could use my name when we're talking about this. We both know, and probably everybody else fucking knows. I wake up in the middle of the night.
I like things like magnesium and melatonin at night, and not because it's going to put you to sleep, but it's going to manage some of the hormones, so you're not going to be zapped out later through the day because your cortisol's flat. You're not getting a good peak in the wintertime as part of it. So, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different natural things that you can do to help improve sleep. Everything from lavender oil to there's an herb called ziziphus that can help. So there's a lot of natural things that have a sedative type component to it. I love magnesium. Hot shower, Epsom salt bath, or just taking oral magnesium at night. Mag is so important for our cells and our bodies. Close to 400 intracellular reactions require magnesium as a cofactor. So, if you don't have enough mag, your body just doesn't run right. I mean, that's needed for all these reactions.
Do you prefer a certain type of magnesium? Because I know there's a lot of different kinds.
Yeah.
Like there's the citrates. Go ahead.
Yes. The biggest issue with magnesium is absorbability and gut irritation. So, milk of magnesia, that's, if you're constipated, that's what you take.
And that's magnesium. Yeah.
Yeah. So I like, my preference is mag malate, is probably the one that I think is the least in my mind. But there's other forms. There's mag treonate.
So that's the one I've been taking a lot lately.
Yeah. And that one crosses the blood-brain barrier. So what they've shown is that patients that have depression, for instance, have low mag levels. Well, you want to be able to get the magnesium into the brain. You've got to get the right type of magnesium.
Yeah.
So that may help improve some of those types of symptoms. So yeah, so nutrients can be specific for certain areas, but mag treonate, more for anxiety, depression, but it works great just as a calmer, because when you got a lot, on your plate, it's easy to get, your adrenaline gets up, your cortisol gets up, and balancing it with natural things is great because you're going to burn all that stuff up. That's what people don't realize. Go ahead.
I've tried a variety of different magnesiums, right? And I'm not sure, is it said treonate? I'm not sure if it's treonate or threonate, whatever it is, but that particular one, I've been told so many times that is the best in order to cross the blood-brain barrier, but that will then keep you asleep longer. I haven't found that, although, I do take that one most because everybody keeps saying, hey, that's the best, that's the best, that's the best. What helps me at nighttime the most is not even taking it on an empty stomach, taking it with dinner. And it's always a combination. I don't know which one I'm using right now, but it's a combination of 5 different magnesiums, I think.
Yeah. Just
maybe it's psychological. Whatever it is, I'm hitting it with a shotgun instead of a rifle trying to hit the exact same target. I'm just getting it all in there, whatever I can. That's interesting. Hey, let's backtrack a little bit because we're talking about a lot of things inside the body, but what we haven't touched on is how do we know how to personalize this to us, right? So that's what, in my opinion, the value that I personally get from our time together is far more improved because it is personalized, it is custom, it is like you're not sitting there saying, hey, Chris, you need magnesium, that'll help you sleep. What you're doing is you're saying, hey, Chris, let's do a battery of blood tests. Let's study the nutrient levels in your blood, but then let's study the nutrient levels in the cells, which is completely different. right?
Exactly.
We have to know both. And the completely fucked up thing is if you go to a regular doctor and they take your blood levels of certain things, and they don't know the cellular levels of those nutrients, it doesn't make a difference in the world. They cannot make a good call for you at that point. So can you talk about why we take blood tests and all that kind of stuff?
I mean, blood tests basically help us understand. For me, when someone comes into my office and I'm doing an evaluation, blood tests help me to kind of risk stratify what I need to focus on, right? And we do a very complex evaluation of the lipids, for instance. I look at particle numbers of lipids. I look at inflammation markers for the cholesterol numbers. So why is that important? Because we know that inflammation is the driver for heart attacks and strokes. So if your inflammation markers are really, really high, I know that I have to be aggressive with you. I've got to get your diet in line. I've got to think about what natural things that we can do to lower inflammation. Maybe it's high dose fish oils with you, low carb diets, those types of things. So it allows me to get an accurate picture of, where my starting point is. And then labs always come into play when we're looking at nutrients, and when we do something, how well are you absorbing those nutrients, right? If I'm looking at gut, I may do DNA testing of your stool to see what's growing. So, maybe you've got, what we call dysbiosis or abnormal bacteria there. That all causes malabsorption. I mean, one of the things that I realized about myself during that stressful period with the high cortisol and when I started having all the gut issues is that I was malabsorbing nutrients. When I did my labs, I was blown away with, with my diet that I had any nutrient deficiencies, but I wasn't absorbing them. And so that's the key, is understanding, are you absorbing? When we do something, then we can check it to see, hey, have they improved, right? And I think that's the value of doing lab tests. It allows you to get an idea of, what's important to focus on. And then once you do make some recommendations and you start doing something to see, as a measure, hey, are we better or not? But ultimately, it's not the lab. It's how do you feel? Is your sleep better? Is your performance better? Those types of things. So that's how I look at labs. They're an adjunct to clinically what is happening with you when we talk.
And then how to fix it. So when you and I could tell the exact same story that you just did about being blown away by lab work. First time when I did it, right? I'm a healthy guy. And I've been taking care of myself since the day I was born, and I enjoy that healthy lifestyle. I'm the kind of person who I could take supplements and not feel a thing. Like people say, oh my God, you take the supplement, you will feel so much better. Or if you go on a vegetarian diet, you will feel so much better. Or if you do this, you'll feel so much better. I've done it all. Maybe not at all. I've done a lot, right? Yeah. And never necessarily had a massive energy jump or been able to think far more clearly or anything like that. So when we went through my first blood test, I mean, you and I, we did the blood test out in your clinic. And then when we got it back, we did a quick Skype call, right? And we sat there and we went through it page by page. And you were like, yeah, that's good, that's good, that's good, that's good, that's good, all the way down. And then we're like, well, wait a second. Like, this is off. Not a lot, but this is off. And then this one, like two things, if I remember correctly, were off back then. All the other supplements that I had spent money on, that I had spent time on, that I researched, and I kept thinking, oh, wow, this is going to make me even healthier than I am. Like, needed none of that. Like, my levels of C, my levels of A, my levels of all these my levels of D. Everybody says how important D is. It is super important to keep your D level at a certain number, Absolutely. Right? At a certain level. Yeah. But it is not necessary to be higher than that. That puts you in a risk zone for other things, right? Because everything needs to be in balance. But you don't know any of that until you study what's in your freaking cells. And it was so eye-opening to do that. I loved it. I'm sold on this 1,000%, as you know. And I've sent friends and colleagues to you who have said the exact same thing. It's nuts. It's nuts because I don't think people understand, especially executives, how much time they could save, how much more productive they can be if instead of fishing around online to try to find a better supplement, if instead of trying to think they have to exercise more or do something else, I'm not saying anything bad about any of that stuff, but instead of guessing at it, they literally go to somebody who they can trust. And freaking, how long did it take to do a blood test? It took us 15 minutes. I was in your office, and then we went to the gun range and we shot for a while as targets, and
Right.
spent the rest of the day messing around out there, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
important, very important. Hey, so I have a list of, and this is not a full list, but a list of things that I do on my end, which correlate very well to what you were saying, sleep, the exercise, that kind of stuff. I have things that have made a big difference in my life from a energy standpoint, physically, mentally, is being active. Now, being active and exercising are two completely different things. I put them in two different categories. Exercise, great. I go to, I'm in the gym every single day, just for a short amount of time, but I'm in there every single day. It's hard for me not to because I owned a chain of health clubs for 15 years. So I'm kind of addicted to being in the gym atmosphere. But being active, having a stand-up desk, not sitting down constantly all day long, having meetings where I actually have meetings every once in a while where I'm walking with somebody and we walk outside and we have a meeting outside. Being active, super, super important. Like, that's made a big difference in my life. Sleeping, I'm not the best at that. Like, I've not mastered that. I would love to master that. So far, I haven't found the solution. And I think the fact that I haven't found a solution helps me lose even more sleep because supplements. There are certain supplements that I take that I believe have made a big difference. And you and I should talk about that because of the mitochondrial stuff that you have developed also. Focusing on mitochondrial health, having, I can't read my handwriting, so I don't even know what this one is. Having a hobby. Again, not something that I'm good at. My hobby is business. I love being in business. I love having meetings. Like, my kids are a hobby for me, but they're far more than that. But they are my quote unquote escape. They are how I recharge, which is what a hobby is. You have a couple of hobbies that ever since I've known you, you have. They are in your heart. They're in your cells. Your family, your spiritual life, tennis. And then we wouldn't call it professional. What would we call it? Competitive shooting, right? Marksmanship. So having those things, I think, is huge for us as executives. And by the way, when I talk to you and I say things about executives, it's just for anybody who doesn't know you yet. You are an executive as much as you are an MD, right? You own a chain of med spas. You have your own med practice, right? So you are growing your companies, multiple companies, as well as seeing patients all freaking day, right? And then having family life in the few hours that you're not working. So it's amazing that you even took the time to do this, and I appreciate this. But then cold therapy, diet, and intermittent fasting were the last on my list.
Yeah. I trained you well.
Yeah. Right. I think on this entire list, the only thing that you have not had input on, you and I have talked about the cold therapy, but that's not something that we ever really focus hard on. But that's something that I'm super passionate about.
Yeah, and I think with the advent of more cryo chambers coming around, you're going to see some benefits and some of the healing benefits that occur with that. Even altitudes, they've shown altitude. I don't know if you've ever seen the altitude chambers where you get into these little eggs and it feels like you're going up and down.
I have not done them yet. Where do they have them around you?
There was one in town. I'm not sure. It's been several years since I've been to it. But again, the data is very, very similar. So they've shown that at higher altitudes. Again, anything that puts a little bit of a stress on your body seems to respond very well. Let's talk about that because we haven't talked about that yet. And that's super important for not just the mitochondrial health, but every other system in your body. Can you talk about placing your body through a specific amount of stress and how beneficial that is? Well, I think we do it without even thinking about it, right? I mean, so if you did time restricted feeding, for instance, and you decided, hey, at 6:30, I'm not going to eat anymore. 7 o'clock, I'm not eating more until, I wake up, 7 in the morning. So 12 hours where you're not eating, your body's in a little bit of a stress state because it's not getting that food in, but it's also in the process of cleaning. I think that when it comes to refeeding times are the most important thing with health. And this is something that's really, really overlooked. When you look at data, because I've taken care of a lot of patients that had difficulty managing their weights. And when you start looking at clinical studies, there's, 1,200 calorie studies with two groups. One group front ends their food, the other group eats the same amount throughout the day, and the front ended group loses more weight. And I think it has to do with, again, the ability of your body to clean out, because they've shown it's not a metabolism issue. Your resting metabolism stays the same no matter what you do. It's kind of your basal, needs. So, the most important, I think, thing for how our bodies react is how we feed. You start looking at exercising and when is the best time to feed. There's the idea of, well, if I want to lose weight, there's the idea of training low, which is where you don't eat before you work out. And then I think most importantly is post-exercise within that 30 to 45 minutes, making sure you're getting carbs and protein. And where I kind of learned a lot of, the difference in feeding was in my friends that were bodybuilders and the ones that even were professional bodybuilders, and how they would completely carb restrict. And then, one meal they'd eat a huge amount of carbohydrates, and the next day they'd lose 5 pounds. So, and it's true, when you carb restrict and then you refeed that carb, there's some benefits to that. So I think that the changing diet is actually pretty benefit for our bodies for a lot of different reasons. I've seen that with fat too. Like if you restrict fat too much and then you refeed it, that may help you burn that fat better. But I look at hierarchies of the nutrients. What is the best carb for my body to run on? For me, it's greens and colorful vegetables, right? All those colors are your antioxidants that I mentioned. What are the best proteins? Well, you want proteins that are complete. I'm a pescatarian, so I love fish. I try to stay away from as much red meat as I can, unless it's grass-fed or it's venison.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to fat, there's a hierarchy. What's that?
Or bison.
Yeah, or bison.
So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, I've been avoiding. I don't mean to interrupt you. Please don't lose your train of thought. I've been avoiding red meats because, like we were talking about with the blood tests, the few things that we noticed on my blood test was that my iron level was slightly high, cellular iron level, which is not a good thing. So not a bad thing because it was just slightly high, but not something I wanted. And at the time, I was eating red meat once a day, maybe once every 2 days, all grass-fed, which was still good, but still a very high amount of iron in it. So I restrict my red meat now. This has been 2.5 years since our first blood test, I think, together, and that has made a marked difference because I get my blood tested on a regular basis, and my iron level is perfectly normal now. But I still don't eat that much red meat. When I do, it's bison, it is venison, or it is organic grass-fed meats.
Right. Exactly. And when the cow's eating grass, there's actually more omega-3s, so the fat is healthier than a cow that's being fed corn and high sugar diets.
Hey, so what's interesting? I'm sorry to keep interrupting you.
Yeah.
So and the reason why is because I happened to just be over a friend's house. It was our board meeting last night, board of directors meeting, and instead of having it in our boardroom, a buddy of ours we had it at his house, and dinner was red meat, and he said, oh yeah, so this chef came in and she's like, yeah, this is grass fed. And I said, oh, just out of curiosity, like, what do you mean by that? She goes, well, it's grass fed. I said, is it pastured like all year round, or is it fed grain all the time and then just finished, like grass finished? instead. And she's like, good question. Because the cows that we get this from are mostly fed on corn. And she's telling me how good that is. Meanwhile, I'm like, yeah, that's not good. Like, that's really not good. I mean, number one, that's not good. Number two, my guess is that corn was probably hit with Roundup many times prior to it being fed to the cow, and then they're let out to pasture, to graze, just to finish them. And they think because they finished them a little bit. That's why we focus on organic grass fed, not just grass finished or whatever else. Sorry to interrupt you, but
that's interesting. I'm gonna start asking that question because
people don't like you when you start asking questions like that.
That's okay. I'm fine with that. So anyways, hierarchy of fats. So the other really, really good thing for brain function is having healthy fats. The brain is primarily fat, right? So the two fats that I like are, omega-3s, okay? And omega-3s, primarily come from fish oils. If you're vegan, DHA can come from algae. So that's where fish get their fish oils from, is from algae. So there's algae-based DHA. DHA is just one of the fish oils. EPA and DHA are the two main fish oils. And the reason fish oils are so good is because in your body, they turn into our natural anti-inflammatories. So they turn into resolvins and something called marsins, which basically lower inflammation. The other really good thing for brain health is phosphatidylcholine, which really helps. It's kind of like the fats that are around the nerves in the brain. And I've used this for patients with ADD to help, improve that processing. I've used it, it's interesting. So phosphatidylcholine, really, really good. Now, natural sources of choline, if you like eggs, is the yolk of an egg is a good source of choline. So just making sure that you've got the choline, in the system. But
are
again,
different kinds of choline, or is phosphatidylcholine are there different kinds?
Yeah, well, phosphatidylcholine is a phosphatidyl group attached to a choline group. So
is that what you're getting from the yolk?
You're getting the choline, from the yolk.
Not the phosphatidyl?
No. Well, I'm not sure. That's a good question. I'm not sure how much you're getting of that, but the yolk. Now, if you cook the egg too much, you're not getting it. It's got to be. But just a great, great source of choline. Choline is part of one of the neurotransmitters of the brain called acetylcholine. So again, if those neurotransmitters are depleted, that brain functioning doesn't fire at the same way that it used to.
Yeah. Well, listen, you're saying all the right things because I love eggs. So, but where I live, this is hysterical because, as you know, I have a relatively busy life and I'm on planes a lot. So where I live now, the plane lands and then I get into a car and I kind of close my eyes as I'm being driven to my house, and about 45 or so minutes after, I start to hear horses and chickens, and I open up my eyes and I'm getting dropped off at my house. I'm surrounded by people who have chickens grazing. I mean, not right around me, but within a mile. I've got a guy who has 300 plus chickens that are out grazing all over his giant property, which is amazing. So the eggs that we get, the yolks are like golf balls. They're solid. I mean, you got to stick them with a fork to break them. It's not like they're going to accidentally break when you crack that egg. And they're dark, like almost orange.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah. And I'm sure they're incredibly tasting too. They taste so much different than you get in the regular stores.
You know what? I haven't had a regular egg in other than if I'm on the road and I have a cooked egg, which you don't know what that really tastes like because of all the spices. Haven't had a regular egg in probably 15 years. I've been just
spoiled,
keeping my farmer in business over here. Yeah. Hey, so I have a question out of, going back to probably the very first thing you talked about, sleep. Um, so you said, hey, one of the things that you monitor is not just, the sleep, but also the sleep patterns, but also how do you feel when you wake up? Uh, I I believe I am of the belief that you need a certain amount of sleep in order for that process. What is that process called? Where you're washing away the toxins in your brain. I forget what that process is called, but you could Google it. Whoever's watching, and figure that out. But there is a specific process that if you don't sleep enough, the toxins are not washed, quote unquote, out of your brain, and you don't perform as well cognitively the next day. Um, However, I wake up often at 3 or 4 in the morning, and sometimes I just get up and I'm starting my day. I don't like to, but I'm completely refreshed. So I'm not getting the 8 hours that I would really love to get. So
Right.
your suggestion would be try to sleep more.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, I think sleep requirements will differ from different people. And if you've got um, a highly functioning system, you may not need as much sleep as some other people that do. So,
Yeah.
But I think in general, that 7 to 8 hours, somewhere in that range, is probably, at a minimum where you need to be. But if you need 10 or 12 hours, your system may just be off, and you still feel tired when you wake up in the morning.
Yeah.
So like I said, there's so many things that affect it. If you're waking up early, it's probably just, more anxiety and stress. You're thinking about things. You just can't shut your mind
Yeah, I
off.
think I think I get like a cortisone boost.
A burst, right? Yeah,
Yeah, which
boost
is
at that
nuts.
time, and your body will get into a rhythm, right? So if you keep getting up at that time, your body's going to remember that time, that you're getting up. So um, you just have to be careful not to do that too much, and figure out how to change that so you don't turn it into a pattern.
Yeah. It's already past that. Hey, so let's wrap up. And I really appreciate the amount of time. I know you were kind enough to mute your phone. You were kind enough to wait until all the nurses and everybody left the office. I appreciate that. I know how busy you are over there, and I know I'm keeping you probably away from Dee and your family, your wife and your family, right now for dinner. So go to them. But before we do, um, uh, people who want to get in touch with you, like if they want to come down and see you, let me be completely honest. I have sent folks to you, and you have always told me, hey, listen, they don't necessarily need to come to me, because like some of the guys on my board of directors or people who run billion-dollar companies, maybe they don't have the time to get on a plane, go to Jacksonville, Florida, sit down in your clinic with you. But I truly believe that's the golden ticket. Like it to go and actually sit down with you instead of having a Skype meeting, having somebody else take the blood, and then have you reading everything via Skype. That's not great. I'd rather actually be there in front of you. But if they do want to come,
100%. Yeah, 100%. I agree. It's just better, and it's the interact, understanding, being in front of someone, explaining, and getting the cues to understand. Are they, is this just going over their head what I'm talking about, or do I need to do a deep dive? And then also and getting the relationship, which to me is one of the most important things. It's not about quantity. It's about, working with people that want to get better, and understanding kind of, how I can help them, give that map to them so they can get from step A to step B to feel better.
yeah, that's huge. So you're in Jacksonville, Florida. Right? I mean,
Yes.
you have multiple locations, but Jacksonville, Florida is where your med practice is. It's Dr. Anthony Capasso, right? So Google you and find you, online. Any other contact that would be helpful? Because I'll put everything in the description also, so that people can just read it. But
I mean, they can contact via email off of the ThinMD Med Spa website if they want to, or call if they wanted to schedule something. Area code 904-694-0992.
Right, and so this is not a free for all. Everybody calls and gets in with Dr. Capasso. It's like that would be like we have to. You have to then go back to the lab and invent that cloning thing, so you could actually have a little bit more time. But this is a good way to, at the very least, find out if you can qualify to work with you, right? And again, that's thinmdmedspa.com or Dr. Anthony Capasso or 904-694-0992. All right. Hey, Anthony, it was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Great seeing you again. Take care, Chris.
All right, bye-bye.
No matter what stage of growth you're at, we all need an unbiased review of what's working and also what might not be working anymore in our business. Because the greatest cause of stagnation in any company, the reason most companies hit plateaus in their growth is because they fail to see the roadblocks that stop momentum in its tracks.